Good evening, everyone. This is Kashish Taneja, and on behalf of Dhwani, I welcome you all for today's talk titled How the African Cheetah Overtook the Asiatic Lion, Misplaced Conservation Priorities, Disregard of the Rule of Law, and much more, by Dr. Ravi Chellam. I would like to invite Professor T.N.C. Vidya to introduce a distinguished guest for the evening.
It's a great pleasure to have Dr. Ravi Chellam speak to us today. He is a very well-known wildlife biologist and conservation biologist. He has been carrying out wildlife research, conservation, outreach, and teaching since the 1980s. He is one of the few people who had done his master's in wildlife biology at the ABC College, when that was the only such master's program available in wildlife biology. And he did his Ph.D. on the ecology of lions in Gir in the 1980s. After that, he was faculty at the Wildlife Institute of India for many years and has subsequently worked at various organizations in leadership positions, such as the United Nations Development Programme, the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, Wildlife Conservation Society India Programme, Madras Crocodile Bank Trust, Foundation of Ecological Security, and Greenpeace India. He has published extensively both for academics as well as for the layperson, and has also worked closely with the government on policy matters, such as serving on the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and Ministry of Tribal Affairs' Joint Committee to review the implementation of the Forest Rights Act. He has also been teaching at various institutes and been involved with the Student Conference on Conservation Science, SSCS Bangalore, for about a decade. In the context of today's talk, we have no better person to talk about this topic than Dr. Ravi Chellam, because, as I said, he has been researching lions in Gir since the 1980s. And apart from field research, he had prepared a plan to translocate and establish a second population of lions, because it would not be prudent to have all the lions in one place. And since 2013, he has also been serving on the expert committee appointed by the Supreme Court to guide and monitor the translocation of lions from Gir to Kuno. So I welcome Dr. Ravi Chellam.
Thanks. I'm told we have an hour, and but I seem to have prepared for more than an hour. So let me not extend it beyond the allotted time. I also want to make this more of a conversation than a monologue. So at any point of time, anybody has a question, just put up your hand and we will take it. What I'm trying to do is to tell the story of my engagement at one level, starting from 1985, and more recently, the googly that's been thrown at all of us, all the way from Africa, in the form of cheetahs trying to save open natural ecosystems and grasslands of India. I wish it was so simple that you import a few cats from Africa and all our problems disappear. But unfortunately, reality bites, and it bites quite badly. This is the animal we're talking about, the African cheetah, quite adorable. And they are supposed to replace the ecological function of the Asiatic cheetah. This is a historical photograph from the Deccan. The Asiatic cheetahs were found quite extensively across India. I mean, the text is there, I'm not going to read it. And there's also a map to illustrate that. And while researching over the last few years, I was quite quick to realize that they were even found as far south as my native village. I come from Tirunelveli, that cheetahs came down all the way. But clearly, there were areas of India which had fairly dense, larger populations. But the story that has been tried to be told to us in the last decade that cheetahs are actually never found in India, they were brought by ships and introduced, is not correct, because they existed in the thousands right across India. And this is, thanks to the Hindu, we have a map. I wrote an article for them and they prepared this map. And the shaded area is of the universal distribution of then undivided India. And while popular, we think 1950s or 47 was the last shot cheetah, more recent research seems to suggest 1967 there should be two locations. Now I'm not sure whether these are animals which escaped from captivity, or still remnants of wild populations. But the historical researchers have now established that within current India, 1967 as the last date, and in Baluchistan as recently as 1997, that they were Asian cheetahs. It is also incorrect to think that cheetahs are purely an animal of open grasslands. They cover a wide swath of habitats, generally tending to be more open and drier. They don't ever occur in rainforests because of their hunting technique and so on, but they can get into fairly dense, dry deciduous, tending to be moist deciduous forests. In fact, from central eastern India, the last reports in what is today's Chhattisgarh were from the edges of sal forest, which is not something that we would imagine as typical cheetah habitat. There is still a relict remnant population of cheetahs in Iran. There are various population estimates, the most optimistic of which is about 50 animals. They cover hundreds of thousands of square kilometers across several districts or provinces of Iran. They have 12 identified individuals, so that's the minimum number of cheetahs in Asia, but it could be up to 40. They have a very, very small captive population. This is primarily cold desert habitats. Cheetahs, of course, have figured quite significantly in our art and culture. This is a painting, and not just cheetahs were held captive. You can see caracal, couple caracals there also. And photographs from the British era. These are all black bucks which were killed, and that's the tame cheetah or captive cheetah which helped catch those black bucks. Handlers with captive cheetah. Now, like most large cats, cheetahs obviously are now locally extinct in India. Lions and tigers have made a comeback. It's because of human action. These were not like dinosaurs going extinct because of natural reasons. And in the case of cheetahs, it was because royalty and then British to some extent wanted cheetahs for what was called as coursing, which is catching black buck, to some extent chinkara also. And this goes back to the 1550s. So it's over centuries, cheetahs were being captured, males and females. And we all know what happens when females are consistently taken out of population. So that depleted the wild population. And then the British came and declared a bounty in 1871, which then pushed the population more or less over the precipice. And then there was some hunting. The cheetahs weren't as favored as lions and tigers and leopards, but there was also some hunting. And because cheetahs thrive best in open habitats, which also tend to be flat, which are favored for human settlement and agriculture, there was quite a loss of habitat loss, resulting also in depletion of prey, and all of that came together, and the cheetahs went extinct in India. So, in terms of photographic evidence, 1947 last cheetah shot. The Indian government declared it extinct in India in 1952. And as I said in the map, the last credible reports from India now are in 1967. In the 60s and the 70s, the government of India entered into negotiation with Iran, trying to get cheetahs in exchange for lions. Iran had lions, they've gone extinct, so we said we'll do a bit of an exchange program. But then the Islamic Revolution there and the emergency in India put paid to those efforts. Then CCMB for about a decade tried to clone, but Iran wasn't willing to give anything for us to start that off. And then this new era, or tamasha, whatever you want to call it, started in 2009. It started with a meeting in Gajner in Rajasthan. This was sanctioned by the then Minister, Mr. Jairam Ramesh. The lead in this meeting was taken by Wildlife Trust of India and the Wildlife Institute of India. A product, an output of this meeting was this report saying, assessing the potential for reintroducing the cheetah in India. Since then, there was a case, a PIL filed in the Supreme Court, I think in 2006-07, basically urging for the lions to be translocated. As Vidya said, I did my PhD studying the lions. The basic objective, the ultimate goal was to use that data to inform, to plan and inform a translocation program. So I took my time finishing 93, 94, 95. We did a survey, made a recommendation to the Government of India, which all got accepted very soon. Money was sanctioned. From April 1995, work started in Kuno. We're talking of crores of rupees, we're talking of hundreds of families being prepared to be moved so that we could create a national park of about 750 square kilometers. So till 2006, Gujarat was unyielding, basically saying these lines are Gujarati, so we can't leave them to go outside Gujarat and stories like that. And so somebody went and filed a petition. Early 2012, I got a call saying that, will you serve as an expert advisor to the court? It was the forest bench of the Supreme Court. I obviously said yes. And so for about 5 months, from February to June, if I remember correctly, of 2012, almost every week, sometimes twice a week, I was going from Bangalore to Delhi to be in court, to assist the court in this matter. The hearings finished in May or June of 12. On 15th of April 2013, the Supreme Court gave its order. We'll get into the details in a bit, but this is just the timeline. The National Tiger Conservation Authority filed a review petition in 2016, and as Vidya mentioned, I am part of the 2013 Order Expert Committee, and the last meeting of that expert committee was held in December, and that was held in Kuno. So December 2017 to what? Now it's more than 6.5 years that expert committee to oversee lion translocation has not even met. So there was this review petition filed. In 2018, based on the review petition, the court gave an interim order, and September, October of that year, there was massive lion deaths. And the reason was canine distemper virus and babesiosis, which is an amoebic disease. Then finally, in January of 2020, the Supreme Court gave an order saying, on an experimental basis, you can bring cheetahs from Africa. January of 22, which is about 15 months ago, the action plan was released. On 17th September last year, the 8 Namibian cheetahs came. On 18th of February this year, 12 South African cheetahs came. And since then, there have been deaths, there have been births, there have been releases, there have been recaptures, and there's been a lot of confusion and a constantly changing narrative. So, this is not my paid job, right? I have a day job. But the amount of activity, action that's taking place here barely leaves any time for me to do what I'm paid to do. Somebody has to keep track, so I think my boss is here. He indulges me enough to allow me to do what I do. Now, the reason I'm showing images of all of this is to let all of you know that these are facts. I'm not doing any hand waving here. These are all available in public domain. This is the first page of the 15th April 2013 order of the Supreme Court. What does it say? It says, lions should be translocated from Gir to Kuno in letter and spirit within 6 months. 15th of April, 6 months, according to my calculation, is 14th of October 2013. We're 10 years past, and there's still no sign of the lions moving. It emphasizes the role of the National Board for Wildlife, which had not even been asked to consider the African cheetah situation. And it says the National Wildlife Action Plan, because we were still in 2012, for that period, 2002 to 2016, is the guidance for taking conservation action. And cheetahs are not even mentioned, while lions are a high priority in the National Wildlife Action Plan. And Gujarat's protestations, it very clearly put to sleep by saying no state, organization or person can claim ownership or possession over wild animals in the forest. Animals in the wild are properties of the nation for which no state can claim ownership, and the state's duty is to protect the wildlife and conserve it for ensuring the ecological and environmental security of the country. Preservation of endangered species for which we have to apply the species best interest standard. So it's not your opinion, my opinion, what is best for the long-term conservation of the species. And very importantly, the order of the ministry to introduce African cheetahs into Kuno cannot stand in the eye of law, and the same is quashed. So this is 15th April 2013. But where are we? As I said, the expert committee last met December 2016. Gujarat is just blabbering away. I mean, it said Kuno's temperature is 1 degree higher than Gir, so lions cannot stand the heat, forgetting that lions live in the edges of Sahara and things like that. I mean, something or the other. I mean, they are like family. Which respectable family will allow family members to go? I mean, don't even ask. I was in court listening to all these arguments. Kuno is more than ready. If it's ready for cheetahs, obviously it is ready for lions. As I said, 24 villages, 1543 families have been relocated. And as per WI and other government records, the prey base is thriving, management capacity has been built. Because lions continued not to be moved, somebody filed a contempt petition in 2016, which eventually was heard in late 2017. And in March 2018, based on assurance from Government of India that a meeting would be held, this contempt petition was also settled. As I said, in 2018, there were lion mortalities. And 2020 onwards, with the action plan, there's the cheetah complication. And today, it's not about conservation science, it's not about ecology. I think for me, it's all about respect for rule of law. As a country, I think that's the way we need to view this. Gujarat's go-to strategy is IUCN guidelines. Saying, oh, you haven't followed the IUCN guidelines, you haven't followed IUCN guidelines. But what does the IUCN actually do? It recommends a whole host of studies in a very general sense. These are desirable. These are not mandatory studies. When if you're an ICU, you don't, you get what I'm trying to say. You don't spend 2 years studying what your health is before you take action. And what it does is really have multiple stages. The two important stages is first to assess feasibility and then to guide implementation. The Supreme Court's reference to IUCN guidelines is with respect to implementation, not to assess feasibility, because it has ordered the translocation of lions within 6 months. So that's what I say. I mean, it had all the inputs. The case went on for more than 3 years, or 6 years actually, and it was talking about implementation using IUCN guidelines. But Gujarat doesn't want to see it that way, and Government of India is not pushing. So I'm of the opinion that it's very wrong of the Government of Gujarat to continue to stall, challenge the feasibility of translocation using IUCN guidelines merely as an excuse. And as I just now said, if Kuno is good enough for African cheetahs, it is most definitely ready for Asiatic lions. What are the excuses given? Kuno has poaching problem. So if Kuno has poaching problem, is it good enough for African cheetahs to be released there? Kuno is too hot. South Africa and Namibia can get very cold. If lions from Gir can't adapt to Kuno, how can cheetahs coming from 9,000 kilometers away going to adapt? So all of it doesn't stand any logical reason. Quick segue into lions distribution ecology. Lions evolved in Africa. Recent genetics, not so recent, 3 years at least now, have established that there are only 2 subspecies of lions, Panthera leo in West and Central Africa, and Panthera leo cheetah in East and Southern Africa. And what used to be called Panthera leo persica, which is the Asiatic lion, actually is Panthera leo. So today globally, there are only 2 subspecies of lion. We can continue to call them Asiatic lions, but this binomial is Panthera leo. So that's Africa, that's the Red Sea, where they evolved, and they moved through fairly large swath of Asia, including North, Central, and up to Eastern India. Till recently, we thought it didn't cross Narmada River. There are recent records saying they did go south of the Narmada River, but not for too long, a few hundred kilometers south of Narmada and still further east into Bengal. And the only reason these numbers came down, this distribution got reduced, is human beings. In the early 1800s, you had this kind of distribution. By 1888, the last lion outside of Gir was shot in a place called Guna in Madhya Pradesh. So that's how rapid the firearms came, and then the lions suffered. Simply because, unlike tigers and leopards, lions are social. So you see one line, you see many lines. Lions can't keep their mouth shut. They roar regularly, unlike tigers and leopards, so if you don't see them, you hear them. Lions tend to favor habitats which are much more easily accessible by people, open, flatter habitats. So I think it was much easier to shoot and kill them. So don't pay too much attention to the accuracy of these numbers. This is some kind of trend line that you need to see. And the key thing really is this number. Close brush with extinction, remarkable recovery. So we really need to pat ourselves on the back that India has done remarkably well in conserving the lions. But in wildlife conservation, success is always in the past. I mean, you might have succeeded till this evening. Tomorrow morning you wake up, that success can very easily get eroded because it's human action that decides whether conservation endures or not. So even successful projects need constant monitoring, need constant investment for that success to endure. And again, don't pay too much to the accuracy of these numbers, but you can see that the trajectory of the population is going up. That's the last count in 2020, which says it's about 674 lions. From all reports, they say it's definitely more than 700 lions, 50% of which are in your backyard, my front garden, somebody's terrace, and so on and so forth. And I'll show you some videos to illustrate that. I'm not exaggerating. The protected area is only about 1,500 square kilometers. And this bar, this line is showing the distribution, geographical space, and as per 2020, lions are found in 30,000 square kilometers. So 1,500, let's say 2,000 square kilometers of protected area, 28,000 square kilometers of human-dominated habitat, which is what I meant by my backyard and your front garden. So this is Gir. Gir has lions, Girnar has lions, some of those pockets have lions, but a lot of the lions are in the surrounding area, and some zoom-ins of those habitats. And now they're proposing Burda, which is barely 100 kilometers as a crow flies from Gir, as the potential second home for lions. And these are some numbers from the 2015 census to tell you how many lions are found where. And you can see, this is Veravel and cities, big cities and ports here. And you can see there are about 30 odd lions here, there are 20 odd lions. And this is Bhavnagar. There's no forest there. There are about 40 odd lions, and so on and so forth. What is the problem? And these are reports not written by me, written by people based on government records. And there's a June 2020 report collecting data from January to May of that year saying 92 lions have already died. And half of those lions, January to May, are due to diseases. And this is based on a reply in the assembly. So I'm assuming it's accurate. In 2 years, 313 Asiatic lions have died. So these are, at one level, numbers that should worry us, but at another level, with an already increasing population, 50% of which is not in its ideal lion habitat, in human-dominated habitats, it should also not surprise us. What should really worry us is the disease component. And with increasing number of lions outside, their exposure to domestic dogs, human waste, all of that is just going to increase the risks that they face. Okay, hopefully I get this right. I'm going to run you through a few videos because they explain much better than I do. That's a tea stall. The tea stall owner is taken. There's langur barking in the background. This in some level is the funniest video of lions I've seen. A security camera footage from a hotel. And that's a busy Junagadh road, you know the date and time stamp. It's 5 a.m. 8th February 21. Two things to watch, there is a line which will figure, and also keep an eye on the security guy in the hut there. So there she comes. That guy is sleeping. See what happens now. He heard the noise. And now he wakes up. Doesn't see anything, he goes back to sleep. And there's traffic going on, main road. Again, he hears the noise. This is daily happening. Well, I said in somebody's terrace, here you go. A lion is rolling on somebody's terrace. Well, this is not such a happy video, but this is life. Can I just come up? In Africa, not my choice of music. So that, I suppose, gives you a fairly good idea as to what happens with lions and people outside the forest. And also how quickly canine distemper can kill. In 1994, if I remember correctly, the Serengeti Mara ecosystem in Tanzania and Kenya, largest lion habitat, has about 3,000 lions. There was an outbreak of canine distemper virus. 1,000 lions died in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, 1,000 lions died. 75% of that population got infected. We don't have 1,000 lions to lose. Official numbers indicate 46 lions died in 2018, but my sources tell me it was a much higher number, and you saw the official numbers that I already have shown. But it's not just lions we need to be concerned about. There's another, probably amongst the most critically endangered species in India, which is the Great Indian Bustard. These are pictures from Rajasthan, the same site, 2 years difference. You can see what's happening. The number of overhead power lines that are coming. Great Indian Bustard is the heaviest flying bird. It cannot change track so easily. It doesn't have forward-facing eyes, it has side-facing eyes, and these lines are not easy for it to detect. So one of the most common causes of death of Great Indian Bustards is collision into these power lines. That's one side. This is another side. In 2020, you see the towers, and by 22 again, you see all those power lines crisscrossing, primarily to evacuate solar energy that's being generated there. And that's what happens. Preeti is in the audience, she was there about 6 weeks ago, and in the 5 days she was there, she saw another Great Indian Bustard killed in collision on a power line. People in the region revere this bird, and here is a memorial they've constructed for one of the bustards that time. Now, let's move into the conservation context. India's first Secretary of the Environment, Professor Gain Krishu, said this in '95 that the reintroduction project, which means the cheetahs, was discussed threadbare during Indira Gandhi's tenure and found to be an exercise in futility. Okay? The current push is saying, oh, it is the only large mammal that's gone extinct since independence, so it's our moral duty to bring it back. If it is such a strong moral calling, why doesn't the National Wildlife Action Plan, which now covers 2070 to 2031, does not even mention the cheetah? I've read it multiple times, I can't find any reference to the cheetahs. And here is the document. And in chapter 3, which deals with conservation of threatened species, if you, yeah, 2.2, identify suitable alternative homes for species having 1 or 2 isolated populations, such as, and there is lines mentioned there, and prepare conservation plans with the same target, start in 2018 to be completed by 2021. And there was a standing order of the Supreme Court from 2013 saying do it. But anyway, nothing has happened despite these targets. And as I said, the cheetah does not even figure in this document. The other species argument that we need a charismatic species to bring focus to these habitats, again, doesn't sell with me. What charisma is lacked by our wolves, caracal, Great Indian Bustard, or the lion, chinkara, black buck, and I could go on. There's no shortage of charismatic species in this country. The bigger problem with the cheetahs is an enormous diversion of attention and financial resources. And as per official records, it's to the tune of $55 million for what is essentially going to be a stamp collection. I don't think India is ever going to have self-sustaining cheetah populations, and I'll explain that in a bit. Just to make sure that you also kind of agree with me on the charisma of the species, this is Indian wolves, outskirts of Pune, not even in some great protected area. This is in our commons, caracal from Ranthambore, Great Indian Bustard from Maharashtra, and of course my favorite animal. So it gets a little more attention. Desert cats, black buck, and even the hyena. I mean, often reviled as dirty and smelly and so on and so forth. Doesn't it look cute here? Desert fox. There is a lot of talk, but if you cut to the chase and look at the data, this is what the data is telling us. That wildlife habitat funding has been slashed by 47% in 3 years. And this is a report in March 22, not so long ago. And this is the next court order we're talking about, which is the January 2020 court order, based on which now the cheetahs have been brought. The important thing to read is it's a very short order, but it makes 2 important points. One, it's not reintroduction, it's introduction of cheetahs. So that's in the first page. Second page, it tells it should be brought in an experimental basis. Okay? So you can't bring hundreds of cheetahs and assume something should happen. There should be a framework for how you bring them. Watch over it, and based on data, see. So in case there are some difficulties, notice about the location, we are informed that the location will be changed to another. So that's the order of 2020, but the way the action is playing out is somewhat different. And this is the cover page of the action plan. And what does the goal say? Cheetah metapopulation to perform its ecological function as a top predator. I mean, that's the goal of the project. And we all know to play an ecological function, you first need viable, self-sustaining populations. How many cheetahs are free-ranging in India today? Does anybody have an estimate? How many cheetahs are out there? Free range. Come on, yeah. Give some number, no? 3. They released 4, they've taken one back into captivity because he moved farther than they thought he should move. Okay? The cheetah didn't take permission, so they brought him back. So there are 3 cheetahs. And there's no sign of other cheetahs being released. They are now saying before the monsoon, 5 more cheetahs will be released. But that announcement was made before the 3rd animal died. So we don't know what impact that's going to have. So 5 plus 3, let's give them that. With 8 animals, what ecological function are they going to be able to do? And you're talking of then populating historic range, thereby contributing to global conservation efforts. I mean, some connection to reality is good to have. What does the science tell us? They exist in extremely low densities. And there's a good reason for that. Cheetahs co-occur with lions in Africa, with lions, with wild dogs, with spotted hyenas, with leopards. All of them, spotted hyenas and wild dogs, because they are group dwelling, they are stronger than the cheetah. And the leopard and the lion, of course, one-on-one are strong. So they can't afford to overlap with these stronger predators and exist in high densities. Second, their hunting is chase, short burst of speed. So they can't hide and hunt. So any of the cheetah hunt is going to be recognized in the habitat by all the other predators, and they're going to come and take the kill away. So they can only survive in very low densities. So on an average, in the best of habitats of Africa, 1 cheetah per 100 square kilometers. Well, Kuno is supposedly the best site for cheetahs in India, and the national park is, let's assume, 750 square kilometers. And I'm being generous and say maybe 10 cheetahs. Is that a viable population? The action plan says up to 21 cheetahs in 15 years. That's what the action plan said in January 22. The authors of the action plan are now contradicting. Now they are saying only 8 cheetahs can live in Kuno. The same people who wrote the action plan, who brought the cheetahs, till 28th February were going by the action plan. From 1st of March, the tune has changed. We are now saying maybe 8 cheetahs can survive in Kuno. But look at the timeline. 21 cheetahs in 15 years will then save grassland all over India, will save Great Indian Bustard and everything else. In the larger landscape in 30, 40 years, it will be 36. And that's my comment on those 2. Again, ecology tells us, in the best of habitats in Africa, average female home range size is 760 square kilometers. So Kuno is actually smaller than the average home range size of an adult female. But this is home range, this is not territory, so there will be overlap. I'm not saying Kuno can only hold 1 female. It can hold multiple females, but these are numbers which are important, good to have. Science tells us this. So we wrote a paper. It's a communication, not a paper. It was published in October last year. And basically the argument we're making is this is an ecologically unsound plant, extremely costly, it's a distraction to conservation that we cannot afford. And there are potential ecological disease and genetic risks by bringing these cheetahs. Let's also be clear that this is not the most closely genetic stock. The closest genetic stock is the northeastern population of cheetahs. We are getting the South African population of cheetahs. And there is this unsubstantiated claim that cheetah are running out of space in Africa. So India is now helping Africa conserve cheetahs, right? And this claim is coming from fenced reserves, which are only in a couple of countries like South Africa and Namibia. Africa is more than these 2 countries, according to my understanding. It also assumes India has suitable and sufficient areas for these cheetahs. And they, by their own admission, there is no track record of cheetahs introduction having succeeded in unfenced areas. And India doesn't fence its protected areas. So with no track record, you're moving animals 9,000 kilometers and hoping, and let's also not forget, while cheetahs started hunting deer, primarily in Africa they hunt antelopes. Here they have to hunt cheaper. They've been doing well in captivity. We don't know, we don't get very much information from the free-ranging situation what they are doing. And of course, the most fantastic claim is that these animals from Africa will suddenly trigger some love for our open natural ecosystems like grasslands and endangered species dependent on these open natural ecosystems. So a lot of confusion between data, experience coming primarily from fenced habitats and extrapolating that to the free range. None of the cheetah biologists involved have experience with free-ranging cheetahs, and they are advising introduction into India in a free-ranging situation, and their expertise, if at all, is coming from fenced habitats. So India has space, but it also has 150 times higher human density than Namibia and South Africa. So I don't know where the space argument can come from. And our conservation ethos and practice does not allow fencing. You think by fencing you're keeping wildlife in, you're also keeping people out. People don't like to be kept out. And India is primarily seen as a solution to the surplus population problem in fenced reserves of South Africa, and I don't like that. I don't think we should be pandering to a problem that we have nothing to really do with. They have not explored the scope for conflict with human beings and or death of introduced cheetahs, and that's not really been factored in. And we make the argument that this project will undermine science-based conservation, especially other translocation, because it is bound to fail. This is what fencing does in India. This is not from so long ago, it's about 3 years, 4 years ago, Nagarhode, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, it's all there for us as to what works and what doesn't work. It's not just with the action plan, they've been making all kinds of statements, and as I said, the narrative changes, and read it here. And one of the main movers of the project, we will lose a tremendous amount of animals, we know this. Will somebody start a conservation project with this kind of an attitude? I mean, don't those animals deserve some empathy from us? And he's saying, we will need to regularly supply cheetahs from Africa, a goal that will require a minimum of 500 to 1,000 individual cheetahs. To establish 36 cheetahs in India. I mean, ROI, kuch gadbad hai na? We don't move animals in India. He's coming from the fenced concept, we will move animals, exchange between reserves and even between who's going to pay the bills? Getting back to the objective for, again, as I said, it's about this metapopulation concept and then saving the open forest and savanna systems. And these are the systems that the cheetahs are supposed to save. And we have thousands of square kilometers of that. There are 2 maps. These are maps of the open natural ecosystem. And this is a map from the wasteland atlas of India. If you superimpose one over the other, and you can see that the geographical coverage of this map is slightly larger than this. They completely match, and almost every single square kilometer of open natural ecosystems will be subsumed by our wasteland atlas map. If India continues to categorize open natural ecosystems as wastelands, what is the attitude the manager will have towards it? How will we ever pay attention to it? And it doesn't need an African cheetah to change this categorization. It requires a government order, the Ministry of Environment or Land Resources or whoever is in charge of wasteland atlas should basically say, these are not wastelands, these are valuable ecosystems, and these need to be protected. Instead of doing that, we are bringing cheetahs from Africa to try and change the situation on the ground. As far as Kuno is concerned, they say it's the best habitat. The primary aim is to establish a free-ranging population of Kuno. And if you've been reading the newspapers in the last 2 or 3 weeks, Madhya Pradesh has now said Kuno cannot hold any more cheetahs. And how many there are out there? 3. They're going to release 5 more. So maximum 8 or 10 cheetahs in Kuno. The rest of the cheetahs have to be somewhere else. So Madhya Pradesh has written to ATC saying, help, we can't, they have 20 cheetahs in captivity. And they've been in captivity in a combination of Africa to India from about June of last year. So it's getting to be 12 months of captivity for these cats. Okay? Now, I think to some extent I've already told you about this, that this is all giving you quotes. Now, the intervention of NTC has said your order of April 2013 is seen as a blanket ban. So no country in Africa is willing to give us cheetahs, or no state in India is willing to host cheetahs. So kindly give us permission to import cheetahs, and our action will not adversely affect lion transportation. This is on court record. The NTC has actually done that. And the plea was to allow us to explore other sites. By implication, we will not go to Kuno, we will explore other sites. So the order in 2018 says the following. Basically, the earlier application was to import into Kuno. By way of application, reintroduction sought to be made in some other places mentioned in para 3 of the application. What does para 3 say? It talks of Naradevi in Madhya Pradesh and Satyamangalam in Tamil Nadu. Other sites. And look where we are. I mean, the action plan does not even mention Satyamangalam. Naradevi is mentioned. But Kuno, which they said they would not consider, came out as tops. Pandemic, soon up, and there was the CEC order also, which basically said that India does not have the required habitat and prey density to support. I mean, these are all official orders and documents on record. So we have this experimental basis, so on and so forth, and data is supposed to come in and inform these decisions. So based on the order, during the pandemic, Wildlife Institute went and did 12 days of field work. They assessed 6 sites in 12 days. Some sites were assessed less than a day. Kuno, which they said they will not go to, and if anyway, which is the best studied site, was surveyed. 4 out of those 12 days were spent in Kuno. If anybody can see any logic in that, please tell me after the talk. And they're now saying, due to delays in lion reintroduction, Kuno was considered for cheetah introduction. Right? Who's delaying it? So, it gets me angry, but what to do? And the action plan now says, once a cheetah population is established, reintroduction of the lion or colonization would not be detrimental for cheetah persistence. As if the 2013 order does not exist at all. And we'll make some adjustment. The cheetahs will allow the lions and tigers to come. As if we are waiting for this generosity from the government. Now this flagship role is a complete overstatement. In 15 years, if luck holds, they said 21 cheetahs. Bustards are not going to last for 15 years. They're not going to wait for cheetahs to come and save the grasslands or save the population. We don't know what the status of caracal is. We kind of have some understanding of wolves, but they're also losing habitats. So I think this is complete rubbish. Cheetahs are not going to be able to establish themselves, are not going to be able to look after themselves, play any flagship role for the habitat or contribute to conservation of those species. There are actions we can take. And I told you the wasteland example is a good one. Just change the categorization. Allocate resources so that these habitats can be protected. Do not allow further fragmentation, degradation or change of land use in these habitats. Where do our solar power plants come? In these habitats. And these are several square kilometers. And once you put solar panels over a grassland, what do you think happens? Nothing is going to grow underneath. And clearly then it's not wildlife habitat. As I said, plenty has happened. So, I spent the last 2 days putting this presentation together, reading through a lot of stuff. This is a short history of what's happened. 17th of September, 8 cheetahs came from Namibia. They immediately were released, went into quarantine. On the 6th of November last year, 2 males were released from a 10 meter by 10 meter quarantine cage into a slightly larger, what they call a hunting boma. That should have happened in 30 days, but it took 51 days for those 2 males to be released. Then 2 weeks later, another male was released. So that was 64 days rather than the 30 days that was recommended. 27th November, 2 females were released. You have the days there. And the last batch of 3 were released on 28th of November. Released meaning from a 10 meter by 10 meter quarantine cage into a larger hunting enclosure. The entire complex of 11 hunting enclosures is 6 square kilometers. So you can figure out what the math is. And each of this would be about half a square kilometer in size. So that's the Namibian cheetahs. 18th of February, 12 more cheetahs came from South Africa, straight moved into quarantine. And on the 11th of March, which is 110 days from moving into the boma, which should again be only 30 days, 1 male and 1 female were released to range wild, free. So this is the ideal scene, that these animals are running wild. That is followed in 22nd March by 2 more males, and you can see the time period that's taken. Then unfortunately on 27th March, 1 female died, and between 24th and 29th, we don't know the exact date of birth, a litter of 4 cubs were born. On 7th of April, one of the first males, called Oban and now called Pavan, I think, was captured and brought back because he moved too far off, and released again in Kuno. And on 18th of April, which the 12 cheetahs moved from quarantine into boma enclosure, and the Pavan was again captured on 22nd April because he kept moving, and now he is in captive. So he is no longer free range. On 23rd, 1 male died, and on 9th May, 1 female died. So out of the 20 adult cheetahs which came in, 3 have died, which leaves 17 adults. 1 female gave birth to 4, so you can add those 4 cubs. And typically survival rates in cubs is about 50%. So we should expect at least 2 of them to survive if all goes well. The first death, apparently they said it was a pre-existing condition. If the animal was unwell, I don't know why they put it through the stress to bring it all the way from Namibia. The second death, they have not really given the reason, but we have reason to believe that this animal should have had an blunt force injury, because in half a square kilometer it is hunting prey, and it is likely to have gone and hit the fence or something like that, because there was brain hemorrhage. And in the third case, they claim it was due to courtship and during mating. As per their own admission, this long captivity has been extremely stressful for the cats. If they are in high stress, why do you mate these cats? The female has no chance. Where can she go? There's no space for her to run. So this is, and they claim it's natural. Clearly, the male having access to the female is not natural. You have gates, you have tunnels, you have enclosures, you're controlling it. You have made the decision to try and mate them, and that I think was a mistake. And even in the wild, males will harass females to access, to assess and then access if she's available for mating. And there are some injuries. Sometimes it can be mortal. It's very unusual in the wild situation because males have no interest in killing females. They want access to mate with her. But in a captive situation, because of space constraints and the stress, unfortunately she died. Now in response to our paper, the proponents of the project, and it's very strange, there are about 10 or 11 authors to this. The second author is the only Indian, the rest of them are foreigners. It's very, very strange that a conservation project in India is primarily being justified by a bunch of foreigners. And I think there is a problem there. Do they understand the social, economic, cultural, conservation, political context? Are they just lending their name? And unfortunately, one of the persons who's quoted as an author had died several months before the paper was published. And the family is not happy that his name has been used in this. What are the points they're making? First, they erroneously refer to it as reintroduction. The code itself said it's an introduction. The paper keeps talking of it as reintroduction. It tom-toms the great thing that will be done by restoring functional ecological role. I've given you my arguments against that. And that they say sites were chosen based on assessment of habitat, prey, and anthropogenic pressures. This was published 16th of February. 18th of February, the South African cheetahs came. First week of March, the same people are saying Kuno is unfit for more than 8 cheetahs. So, I don't know, I mean, it all seems so surreal. I mean, what is fiction? The statements in March or this publication? Nothing adds up to me. We are talking of 100,000 square kilometers of protected habitats within historical range of cheetah. I would like to see a map of this. 100,000 square kilometers. and an additional 600,000 square kilometers, that's 700,000 square kilometers of cheetah habitat in India. Man, I mean, I would be very happy to go and walk through these habitats and see wildlife, cheetah chasing chikara, black buck, but I don't know where these numbers are thrown. No justification given. There is some data which talks about 2 unfenced releases, one in Zambezi in Mozambique, Zambezi Delta, and the other I think is in Namibia. But these are very recent releases, and they are saying 75 to 96% attained independence in Namibia with a high annual survival rate. Numbers are not given for the survival rate. And they disagree with our contention that the carrying capacity based on African data. And this is 16th of February. First week of March, what are they saying? Kuno can hold 7 or 8 cheetahs. So, as I said, that's where it's very, very confusing. The most recent paper, which is published in first week of April, I think this gives very, very strong scientific insights as to what is playing out today in Kuno. The numbers quoted in the action plan, the first bullet is there. Comment on that. Such high cheetah densities have never been recorded for other free-ranging African cheetah population in unfenced areas, and Kuno is unfenced. So the numbers in the action plan don't add up by any analysis. And they're talking about movement and spatial ecology, and that male cheetahs basically are either territory holders or floaters, and territories are distributed, territory centers are spaced irrespective of ecological conditions to a minimum of 20 to a maximum of 23 kilometers as a straight line distance. So there is no way you can pack in more cheetahs even if you pack in more prey. This is the innate ecology. I mean, I keep jocularly saying in audiences, I mean, animals cannot live in high-rise apartments. I mean, they need their ecological space to survive. So, on Kuno, we know what the space is. How many centers of territory can be so spaced apart? And the in-between areas are then used by nomadic males and by females. The nomadic males are called floaters here. Territory sizes can vary hugely by 50 to 380 square kilometers, which seems to be a function of prey density. And so you have these extremes, 50 to 380 square kilometers, but in both those settings, the territory centers were spaced apart by 20 to 23 square kilometers. So what are their predictions? Namibian population has 1 male and 2 brothers, so they will exist together, 1 male solitarily and the 2 brothers together, that they will establish a territory first, but they will be released first, and those will be separated by 20 to 23 kilometers. So, irrespective of territory size, these 3 males will occupy the entire Kuno National Park, leaving no space for other male cheetahs because of the kind of size that Kuno is. Cheetahs will move enormously, and that's their innate tendency. They will go outside Kuno National Park. It's incorrect to call them straying. Cheetahs don't need traffic lights. They don't need zebra crossing. I mean, they know what they're doing. They're exploring, they're trying to figure out. There are no other cheetahs sent in the habitat, right? So there's nothing to constrain their movement. And that is part of their exploratory phase. And it will take males many months to adjust and settle down. And then the females will settle between the spaces of the male territory. Any males which are then either born or added to it will not find space within the established territory as long as the territorial males are alive, and the females will also have an exploratory tendency and move out of Kuno. My angst comes from why Kuno? You wanted to bring cheetahs, you told the court that you will not go to Kuno, you'll go somewhere else. To me, it's very clear, it's only to continue to stall translocation of lines. It has nothing to do with conservation of cheetahs. I told you the story. No cheetah is going to really conserve, forget grassland, Great Indian Bustard and whatever. It's really to continue to stall translocation of lines. I think 2020 Independence Day from Red Fort, the Prime Minister announced something called the Project Line. And I have a document of that vintage, which talked about 6 sites including Kuno. In more recent, like last summer, in reply to questions in the Lok Sabha, the Minister of State mentions only bird eye in Gujarat. There is no mention of Kuno. He is saying lions are finding their second, third home on their own. There is no need for us to translocate lions. There is no mention of Kuno, there is no mention of the 2013 order. And that's been distorted and reported multiple times in the press. And 2-3 weeks ago, Government of India submitted to Supreme Court in the cheetah case hearing that we need to revisit the need to translocate lions without mentioning the 2013 order. So the Kuno cheetah connection is only to prevent the lions from being translocated. It has nothing to do with cheetahs, it has nothing to do with any conservation. Kuno is a good place. It has, just a few glimpses of what the habitat. It's very diverse, it's not all open. You can see some parts are wet. It's typical for that region. Very productive grasslands. And people have been making statements which really gets me upset. And you can read there, who used to be the chief scientist for the project. And he says the worst enemies for conservation are conservationists. Once it's done and people see the success of it, I think all of them will come around. So I'm waiting for that day. Last few slides. I have lost control of time, I think, just over 5. This is conservation in India. This is not very far from Bangalore. A leopard which was actually killed by people. But look at the reverence with which this old woman is approaching it. And look at the curiosity with which the younger children are looking. I think there is an ethos of conservation that we need to absorb, appreciate, celebrate. By separating people from nature, which is our official conservation policy, we are losing this connect. We keep saying protected areas of wildlife. And I've seen this in the 40 years I've been in this field. Nobody in the 80s and even the 90s ever said, take your lion to Ahmedabad or take your elephant to Bangalore. Today, that's the dialogue. I mean, you throw us out of the forest, you take your wildlife into the forest. My first photograph of a lion, December of '85. I grew up in Madras. I did study Hindi in school, but didn't do very well. Never spoke the language very much. So here I am in Saurashtra trying to speak what is called Kathiawadi there, which is a dialect of Gujarati. And those days in Wildlife Institute, it was a fun time. You'd say, oh, there are lions in Gujarat, go and study them. And roughly that's the level of guidance that is given to us. Go fix your permission, go fix everything, off you go. So my first recce was about 10 days, first 3-4 days in Daman and Ahmedabad trying to sort out permissions, then go and see. Never been to Gir before. So 4 days of walking around, sleeping in the forest, hearing them roar, puck marks, tracks, cats, kill remains, but never a live animal. And I was getting a little worried. I quit a job, I got into this, will I even see an animal I'm supposed to study? The last evening we were walking back, I had a 10-12-year-old boy from the village as my guide. So out of the bush, barely 50 meters away, 4 lions came. And I was scared. The first large cat I was seeing, I had never seen a tiger till then. And the only leopard I had seen was up a rock, about 200 meters away in London. And here there was 4 lions, there. So I kind of said, is that true? So I kind of held my breath and stood. These lions kept coming, and I kept looking at it. This guy was relaxed. He has a little stick and he's kind of, leaning on it and happily looking. Then I realized I have camera, binoculars, all of it hanging. So by the time I could focus, 3 of those animals disappeared. I got this picture. Took me about 6 months to do this, that's me. And there are those lions in the foreground. Simply because lions don't have body markings. To be able to identify them, you need to look at what's called as vibrissae spot patterns. And try looking at vibrissae spot patterns through a screen of vegetation. You can have the best camera, the most powerful of binoculars or telescope. All you're going to get is a screen of vegetation. So often I was working less than 10 meters from lions to be able to identify them and keep track. And those days we didn't have good cameras and it was all still film, not digital. Here's a radio collar. If you look carefully, you can see the collar there, subadult male, sleeping, hot summer afternoon. I crept up to him and took this photograph. He heard the camera go, and that's his response. Pure curiosity. There is no aggression. And that's my own shadow. That's an adult male. I don't recommend you guys do it. I won't do it now. These are much younger, wilder days. But I mean, this is a population of lions which is remarkable. They are wild, but they also give you this kind of access if you know what you're doing. But this is also conservation in India. This is in the national park. Public transport going through, lions having to negotiate traffic. I never tire about talking about lions. Of course, the cheetah is increasingly dominating the narrative for me, simply because most Indians do not know that we have lions in India. I would not be surprised if at the end today in the discussion somebody says, by the way, what did the tiger do? Because that's almost always the kind of questions I get. People forget that I talk about lions, their memory is dominated by tigers. And please go out, enjoy the wild. I mean, in cities also we have some wonderful sunrise and sunset. This is a sunset from Gir. Thank you very much.
The session is now open for questions.
Thank you, that was a wonderful talk. I learned so much. Can you explain the difference between home range and territory? You had mentioned this sometime during your talk. And I also have a couple of questions.
Today your home range includes JNCSR. It is not your territory.
Okay. All right.
Basically, home range is wherever you go. Territory is what you defend. Territory is a subset of your home range. Home ranges will vary typically over seasons. Some part of territory can vary, but depending on resources, if you're a herbivore, you need greenery to eat. If you're a carnivore, you need herbivores to eat. So, there can be seasonal shifts in home range.
I have a couple of questions. I can do that later.
Excellent, if not a little bit depressing talk. So I want to ask, do we have...
The idea is not to depress. The idea is to inform. We're still a democracy.
Thank you. So do we have any data on what the population density of Asiatic cheetahs was in the 1800s and all? Did the British do any of this bookkeeping?
I mean, even today our population estimates are guesstimates. So numbers don't matter. Shouldn't matter.
Thank you.
Vijay, you agree? Vijay, that's fine, right? Numbers at one level don't matter. I mean,
You can make up numbers.
Why there is no lions in the Western Ghats down the south? And there were like thousands of cheetahs historically spread all over the India, right? Why is this ambiguity?
No, lions were also spread through much of India. I would think there probably were a greater number of lions. I told you cheetahs exist in much lower density. So the absolute numbers of lions might have been greater. The geographical distribution might have been limited, but their absolute numbers would have been greater than the number of cheetahs we had in India. Because they exist in much higher. Lions exist in the highest density for large cats, because they're social. Why they don't come in the Western Ghats? Probably they were not given sufficient time. Lions do exist in rainforests of Central and West Africa. It's a misnomer to think lions are open habitat animals.
But why is it not?
We shot them out probably before they could come.
Okay, and cheetahs they need open grasslands.
No, I said no. They occur through a variety of habitats, but generally tending to be drier. They are unlikely to occur in very undulating and wet habitats.
Okay, so if they are trying to introduce whatever the map shows, it's a grassland or wet wasteland, whatever you name it. What about prey for them? If
Well, you asked me this question. Huh?
So like.
These are questions that should have been asked before we got the cheetahs. I mean, we are subjecting these cheetahs to long-term captivity, making them unfit to be released. Cheetahs' average lifespan, let's say with some generosity, 10 years. You put them 1 year in captivity, 10% of life gone. And you're feeding them, because in Africa, they shoot wildlife and throw them in. Entire carcass is thrown in. They don't even see people feeding them. There's a police system where it's suddenly manna from heaven will drop. Okay? But they don't connect people with food. And they are not eating buffalo meat. In India, we're feeding them buffalo meat.
Hi Ravi, great talk. The short question for you is, who is making these calls?
But the longer question, the bigger question is whether it's the Great Indian Bustard and renewable energy parks in its habitat, or it's the non-movement of the lions to Kuno, or it is the bringing in of the cheetahs. India has so many impressive sounding boards, like many of which you have mentioned, the Wildlife Institute of India, the Wildlife Action Plan, the Ministry of Environment and Forests, etc., etc. It has, scientists like you who can weigh in on this. It has Supreme Court weighing in, it has Supreme Court judgment which has been flouted again and again. So really, who is making these calls?
You're the journalist, you have to find out.
That's why I'm asking you.
Clearly, at this point of time, and I'm on record saying this, there seems to be a crisis of coordination and a crisis of leadership for the cheetah project. But you're asking a much bigger question. My sincere hope, and I'm still reasonably optimistic about it, eventually the rule of law will prevail. And that's why I'm saying it's democracy, and it's for all of us to take action and not expect one or two people to take action.
So the same thing that we are looking at in socio-cultural systems in India today, we're looking for in environmental conservation efforts as well. That the rule of law will finally prevail.
The rule of law has to prevail. No, I mean, is that negotiable?
Clearly it is, going by the
So we have to continue to petition the court. Asha.
So the food pyramid in this whole air, within the protected, within the human-dominated areas, what are these lions eating that they are not attacking the humans?
Large cats don't look at us as food. We are bad as food. I mean, somebody like me weighs a bit, but most of us don't weigh enough. Okay? And in their search image, two-legged creatures are not prey. And probably it's also learned behavior. There is consequences if you, which is not to say people are not attacked. Indian rural land, there is no shortage of four-legged prey, live and dead, for lions, leopards, whatever. I mean, Gujarat tends to be vegetarian. Definitely, even the carnivorous people do not eat cattle. So dead cattle are just left out. So there's no shortage, and you saw some shots of them feeding on cattle and so on.
Humans are too salty, I guess.
Sorry?
I mean, we consume more salt, so that is one of the side things.
Don't know. It's very difficult to ask the lion whether it likes salty food or not.
So I was wondering the same thing, who's taking these decisions. In that context, I was wondering if there's any truth, whether you think there's any truth to the, I don't know, rumor or suggestion that was going around that getting the cheetahs there was some sort of quid pro quo so that we abstained in voting at CITES about elephant ivory.
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we did abstain.
We did abstain.
Yeah. So there is.
But then, what is the connection? Because who then is taking decisions at the level of CITES and at the level of the?
Who takes decisions in this country now? I don't want me in trouble. I'm on it.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm not the mic handler.
So, my question is regarding what are the different criteria that you look into when considering a social versus a solitary species, and when you are considering relocating two different kinds of species?
See, solitary species also have a social organization. So, essentially, you need a fairly good idea of its ecology. It means its spatial requirements, habitat requirements. If it's a carnivore, it's prey requirements. And you want stable social units to be translocated. So if you're translocating, let's say a tiger, you want to bring back a tiger population. You don't randomly pick one male, one female and try and make it happen. You say in this area there are two females and one male, we'll capture all three, because then there is an existing social relationship. That's of course much more valid for the lion, because they exist in prides. And the pride is only females. The males can come and go. In the sense their territory presence is roughly 3 years. So if you get the pride, including the cubs, there's no choice with lions. You can't just take the mothers and leave the cubs behind. And some males, it will work.
So in some sense, is it easier to relocate a social species than
I don't know. I don't
solitary?
know. Why would you think so? It will be easier?
I mean, given there is a social structure and you have
Oh, as I said, there is a social structure with tigers also.
the stress level might be reducing for
Don't know. Maybe it's a conversation we need to have. I mean, I'm not connecting readily with what you're saying, but we'll talk. Somebody there?
Hello, sir. Sir, what do you think will be going to happen to this cheetah project in near future? Will it be stopped?
See, I gave a talk at Bangalore International Center about less than a week after the cheetahs were released, I think 21st or 22nd of September. And this very same question was asked. I said, cut your losses. And what I mean is, do not bring any more cheetahs from Africa. If the African countries have any sense, they should realize what they should or should not be. Cheetahs which have come in September, which have come in February, are still in captivity. Why should we be importing more cheetahs to keep them in captivity? Then take it to a zoo. First get your habitat. We put the cart before the horse. We need 4,000-5,000 square kilometers. I mean, there is 10, 70, 600,000, 100,000, 600. Where are those habitats? Then the cheetah should be running. No, why are they in captivity? If those kind of habitats are out there. I don't know whether I answered your question.
Nice talk.
Thank you.
And I want to state that I am not from the similar background as what was a student sitting here. But whatever I get from your talk is we are having short of the land, and we have bought so many cheetahs. So what do you suggest? Where else these cheetahs can be placed apart from, because your talk revolved around Kuno?
Because that in the action plan is the only identified site. Kuno is ready. The site which is ready is not ready. How can the unready sites get ready now? I mean, does it make sense? Kuno is ready, but it's not ready now. Other sites are not even ready. How can they be ready now? Which is why I gave the title, right, and much more. And this is a saga that's going to unfold, unfortunately. You're going to hear this news day after day. Something or the other is going to keep happening. Poor science, bad planning, hurried. Because conservation is not dictating this project. I call it a vanity project, I call it a glorified safari park. I'm going to get into trouble for all of this. But these are my heartfelt, factual, what shall I say? Whatever it is. Anyway.
Hi Ravi, thank you for the talk. I was curious about the translocation of villages, which
Relocation.
Sorry, the relocation of the villages which happened much like a long time back, and I'm curious that based on the notification that might have been issued at that time, which was to prepare the park for lions. So from a legal point of view, does that not pose a problem that these villages were relocated for something different, and now that's just not going to happen, and something
You're
else?
getting into the weeds. You have a 2013 order saying translocate lions within 6 months. That itself we are not doing. Why worry about whether you are translocated for lions or for cheetahs? The big question is still there, no? You answer the big question, rest of your problems get resolved.
Can I answer that a little bit?
Please.
Since I've been to Kuno and I've spoken to villagers since I've been to Kuno and I've spoken to the villagers which got, so they tried to go back, the government didn't let them go back. Then they said, you said we would get jobs as guides and tourist guides and we get all this, functioning villages and so on. Nothing has been done, their promises have not been kept. The last village which is left, which was said Bakcha, which was to be thrown out for the cheetah last year. They have held their ground and said that unless you show us better land, unless you promise us that everyone in this village, and they have a list there which the government doesn't agree to, only then will we move. And they're actually hanging on there. They're the last village of Sahari Adivasis who are actually fighting the government on the ground for, their Gram Panchayat is not signing.
But the question you asked, to me, the bigger question is the 15th April judgment. If that is implemented, downstream everything else gets sorted. In fact, the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh in February announced that by end of this month, ecotourism will start. Because one of the promises is that the local people will gain from ecotourism. Where cheetahs are not settling down, not surviving, what tourism will take place? They are still in enclosures. We make these, I don't know why we make these promises. If it's about conservation, let's focus on the science and do it right, no? Yes, somebody had a hand up. Wait for the mic. Oh.
So why are they recapturing those cheetahs and what is the point?
Oh, it was getting into Uttar Pradesh. And Uttar Pradesh Forest Department is not trained to handle things. That's right on record. This is on record.
So what do you think is going to be the future of Asiatic lions? Because on the one hand you showed that the numbers are rising, but the canine distemper also they're saying that these many lions died, and so actually I shouldn't say this aloud, but I am a Kathiawadi and I had worked on the virus, developing the vaccine for the Asiatic lions. Not great project there, but
wild animals cannot be vaccinated. India, COVID-19 itself, you saw how many humans got vaccinated. How will you? And there's a booster dose requirement. 21 lions were captured in October of 2018. They are still in captivity.
Yeah. So the question is that what is the future of Asiatic lions? Is there going to be a day when the government of Gujarat is going to say that okay, now we have to do something about the disease and translocate?
You are from Gujarat. Yeah. Government of Gujarat, I have no hope. My hope is in rule of law. At some point of time, the Supreme Court has to say, we passed judgment. We said 6 months, it's 10 years. Come October, it will be 10 years. 15th April is already gone this year. Come October, it will be 10 years of the deadline that they prescribe.
Right.
And lions outside, look at the life of the lions outside. Is that the lion's life? Is that how you want your wildlife to live? The lion was caught between how many cars? It was going into a petrol pump. For what? It's on somebody's terrace. Great shot, but do I want to live with a lion on my terrace? No, it's not. It's a serious matter. There are increasing attacks on people. If you really follow the news, you hear people are getting attacked. Which year was this? When did I finish? 89. So 89 to 91. 120 people were attacked. 21 people died. 7 people were eaten. That was a post-drought phenomenon. So lions can attack and kill and eat people. On an average, 15 people get attacked. But that 3 years it went up to 40. So we're sitting on a time bomb. And this was when lions were largely within the forest. Today, 50% of the lions are in, I showed you where they are. I think you would have seen it. There were some 21 lions walking in some city park or something like that. There was Pipav port. You can see containers. There are lions walking inside that go down. They're all, and there's an ashram in Junagadh. Somebody has taken it. It's raining. There are dozens of lions walking. It's so messed up. But the future, the disease risk is a ticking time bomb. Lions are dying through diseases. And these lions outside and inside, they will have contact. There is no strictly outside lion, there is no strictly inside lion. During the phase of their life, if they are territorial, they like to come in. Once they lose territory, they will move on. I think they are getting angsty about time. Oh, there seems to be one last question.
We'll just have one last question and we can have more discussion during the tea.
And can I have some coffee, please?
You said that lions are they have a very diverse. I mean, they can adapt to many types of ecosystems, right?
In Africa, they've lived from the Atlas Mountains through Sahara Desert, through the rainforest to Cape Town.
Right. So why aren't we considering other national parks to introduce lions to?
In India,
Yeah, in India.
the Supreme Court has said introduce in Kumu. Right?
Yeah.
By if I do anything else, I'm disrespecting rule of law. Number one. Kuno didn't come out in my dream. One day I didn't wake up and say, Kuno, go there. I did 4 years of field research trying to understand the requirements of lions. Did 18 months of survey of sites we chose. What are the criteria we use for choosing a site? Lions are territorial animals, they're large carnivores. What do they need? They need space, they need water, they need prey, and limited human disturbance. Find me sites. I mean, I am not going to dole out numbers like 100,000 square kilometers and such and such. Where are the sites? India is 1.4 billion people. Where are the sites? In 90s, we had 3 sites proposed. Dara Jawar Sagar, which is barely 10 kilometers wide, so you drop a line in the center, 5 kilometers this way or that way, it's going to get out. Sita Mata in Udaipur district, excellent habitat, no prey. Kuno, 4,000 square kilometers of forest, low prey, but prey has built up, which is why we chose Kuno. And when you reintroduce in its former range. And the lion's range, I showed you a map. So that's the geography in which we needed to find sites. And these are the only 3 sites we could find. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
On behalf of Dhwani and JNCSR, I would like to thank Dr. Ravi Chellam for his insightful talk. I would request Professor T.N.C. Vidya to please present him with a sapling as a token of our appreciation and gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucas, what should I do now?
Yes, we have.
This concludes our talk. I would like to thank the audience for their engaging questions. I would like to thank the administration, the President's office, and Dining Hall for their support for organizing this event. Please join us for tea and snacks outside. Thank you.